Cannabis Common Sense, the show that tells the truth about marijuana and the politics behind its prohibition.
All right, welcome to another exciting edition of Cannabis Common Sense. This week we have a great guest from Cincinnati, Ohio, Lynne Wilson of Hemp Rock, and she will be talking about her longtime activism there. She's also produced a little video about Gatewood Galbraith that we're going to feature a little clip of as well. We have an interesting hemp news segment for you tonight. We'll continue making progress at the federal level. And stay tuned as we bring on our infamous Dancing the Cannabis Leaves.
I feel the force.
First story tonight from Washington, D.C. Last Thursday, on May 28th, House Judiciary Committee Chairman Jerrold Nadler, along with Cannabis Caucus co-chair Oregon's only Earl Blumenauer, California's Barbara Lee, Judiciary Crime Subcommittee woman Sheila Jackson Lee, introduced the Marijuana Opportunity Reinvestment and Expungement Act of 2021, better known as the MORE Act. The act repeals the long-standing federal prohibition of marijuana, thereby ending the existing state-federal conflict in cannabis policy and providing state governments with greater authority to regulate marijuana-related activities. When the MORE Act was approved by the House of Representatives last December, Congress demonstrated in no uncertain terms that the days of federal marijuana prohibition were numbered. At that time, last December, in the last legislative session, the Senate chair of the majority was Kentucky's Mitch McConnell, who would not let it go forward, of course. This year, the Senate majority leader is Chuck Schumer, who on April 20th tweeted out, "Happy 420, legalization's coming." While Senate Majority Leader Schumer and Senators Booker and Oregon's own Ron Wyden continue to solicit feedback for their forthcoming legislation in the upper house, the House is preparing to once again advance criminal justice-focused legislation that will bring our failed prohibitionist policies to an end, while also ensuring that those Americans who saddled with the consequences of a marijuana conviction can have their records cleared. A new study, the enactment of statewide adult use legalization laws is not associated with any nationwide changes in either the use of cannabis by young people or its availability, according to data published by the National Center for Education Statistics, a federal government bureau. The NCES is part of the United States Department of Education's Institute of Education Sciences. Consistent with prior data, the federal report concludes that youth marijuana use has remained unchanged over the better part of the past decade, during which time numerous jurisdictions have legalized the sale of marijuana products to adults. The study reads, quote, "The overall percentage of students who reported using marijuana at least one time in the previous 30 days in 2019 was not measurably different from the percentage in 2009. There was no measurable differences between 2009 and 2019 in the percentage of students who reported that illegal drugs were made available to them on school property," end quote. These data reaffirm that youth marijuana use has remained stable despite the liberalization of adult use laws. These findings make it clear that cannabis access can be legally regulated for adults in a manner that's safe, effective, and that does not inadvertently impact young people's habits. The report further acknowledges that white, black, and Hispanic students all consumed cannabis at similar rates during the time period, but that self-reported use was higher among LBGT students and Native Americans. The text of this study, Marijuana Use and Illegal Drug Availability, is online at the federal government's website for the National Center for Education and Sciences. This Tuesday, Amazon, the big company, said that it will stop drug testing many of its workers for marijuana and will instead, quote, treat it the same as alcohol use, end quote. It also formally joining the movement to support cannabis legalization, and they will actively lobby Congress in support of legislation to end federal prohibition. Amazon said in an update posted on its company news site, quote, in the past, like many employers, we've disqualified people from working at Amazon if they tested positive for marijuana use. However, given where state laws are moving across the United States, we've changed course, end quote. Amazon will now, quote, no longer include marijuana in our comprehensive drug screening program for any positions not regulated by the Department of Transportation, and will instead treat it the same as alcohol use, end quote. It will continue to do impairment checks on the job and will test for all drugs, including cannabis and alcohol, after any incident. The move by one of the United States' largest employers will lead to a significant reduction in the number of workers in the country who face the prospect of being fired simply for using cannabis at home while not on the company clock. In addition to instituting the workplace policy shift, Amazon says it will also lobby Congress to legalize marijuana that was introduced last week by House Judiciary Committee Chairman Gerald Nadler. The company's post said, quote, because we know that this issue is bigger than Amazon, our public policy team will be actively supporting the Marijuana Opportunity Reinvestment and Expungement Act of 2021, the MORE Act, federal legislation that would legalize marijuana at the federal level, expunge criminal records, and invest in impacted communities. We hope that other employers will join us and that policymakers will act swiftly to pass this law, end quote. Amazon posted on Tuesday. In recent years, Amazon's faced lawsuits from workers who were fired for using medical cannabis in accordance with state laws. In Illinois, members of the Illinois state legislature have given final approval to legislation aimed at increasing diversity in the marijuana industry. Illinois' House Bill 1443 provides an additional 110 marijuana dispensary licenses, which will be awarded to qualified applicants via two separate lotteries comprised of 55 licenses each. The second lottery is reserved for equity applicants who have or whose family members have a past marijuana conviction or who have lived in a disproportionately impacted area for at least 10 years. The bill now heads to the governor's desk, J.B. Pritzker, who's expected to sign it into law imminently. Illinois Governor Pritzker said in a statement, quote, equity is at the core of cannabis legalization in Illinois, and this essential legislation will accelerate our collective vision to make sure that the communities harmed the most by the war on drugs can participate in this industry as it grows, end quote. The Nevada legislature sent multiple marijuana reform measures to the desk of Governor Steve Sisolak this week, amending marijuana penalties for minors, rescinding per se driver thresholds for THC, and permitting consumers to obtain cannabis products at curbside pickups. In New Jersey, their Governor Chris Sununu, a Republican, signed legislation into law expanding the pool of patients eligible for medical cannabis access in that state. Minnesota's Governor Tim Walz signed legislation into law this week that includes provisions permitting registered medical cannabis patients who are 21 or older to access medical cannabis flowers. Up to now, they could not do that. The Colorado House of Representatives approved a bill seeking to remove many restrictions on medical cannabis access for doctors and young patients. Unfortunately, in Louisiana, the senators voted 62 to 34 to kill an adult use marijuana legalization bill on the Senate floor. Here in Oregon, marijuana sales in Oregon have remained strong even throughout the past year's global pandemic, and they're expected to continue to grow, the state projected in a new economic forecast report. Analysts with the state's Department of Administrative Services Office of Economic Analysis said that while winter sales were about what they expected, sales in recent months have strengthened, quote, setting new records even as the outlook expected sales to taper somewhat as more entertainment options reopened and employees began to return to the office, end quote. The report says it's unclear whether the sales data reflects natural increases in demand for cannabis products or increased spending power from stimulus checks that were issued in March. Other legal states, such as Illinois, have seen similar trends in cannabis sales throughout the coronavirus pandemic. A growth in population of Oregon, combined with increased wages, will also help drive long-term increased demand for adult-use cannabis. The latest projections for tax revenue the state will generate in the 2019 to 2021 biennium about $304 million. That will continue to increase each biennium, reaching $462 million in the 2027 to 2029 biennium, the analysis says. The bottom line impact is available recreational marijuana revenues are increasing. The last story tonight is from Toronto, Canada. The topical administration of plant-derived cannabinoids is associated with wound closure in patients with refractory leg ulcers, according to data published in the journal Experimental Dermatology. A team of researchers affiliated with the University of Toronto and the University of Ottawa assessed the effects of topical cannabis-based treatments in conjunction with compression bandaging in 14 elderly patients with recalcitrant leg ulcers. They reported that, quote, complete wound closure, end quote, was achieved in 11 patients. The treatments were well tolerated and no adverse reactions were reported. The authors concluded, quote, the rapid wound closure of previously non-healing venous leg ulcers among elderly and highly complex patients suggests that topical cannabis-based medicines may become effective adjuvants in conjunction with compression therapy. This may also indicate that they may have an even broader role within the community and wound management, end quote. A pair of prior case reports have similarly shown that the topical administration of cannabinoids facilitates wound healing and reduces the use of analgesics in patients with rare skin blistering disease, epidermolysis bullosa. This study, Topical Cannabis-Based Medicines, a Novel Adjunctive Treatment for Venous Leg Ulcers, an open-label trial, appears in this month's edition of Experimental Dermatology. That is the end of our hemp news segment this week. If you are a loved one or looking for a physician who can help you get a medical marijuana permit, then we have doctors all over the country who can help. I know Lynne Wilson, our upcoming guest, is going to talk about a Dr. Goldfarb in Cincinnati. But if you need to find a doctor, give us a call at 503-235-4606. We have a referral service for the country. We can help you get a doctor's appointment for a medical marijuana permit in your state. So just call us at 503-235-4606. Now we're going to go to our interview with Lynne Wilson and help us restore hemp. I'd like to introduce Lynne Wilson with Hemp Rock Radio and television in Cincinnati, also active in Kentucky and the rest of mid-America. Welcome to the show, Lynne.
Thank you so much for having me on. It's been some time since I've done any radio or television or anything, so it's good to be back. Thanks for having me.
Sure. You've been working on cannabis activism for a long, long time. Let me start way back at the beginning. I often do this. I'll put you on the spot. When did you first use cannabis? What was your first cannabis experience?
My very, very first cannabis use was I was 13 years old, hanging out with a boyfriend who was 17. And he got me high for the first time, and we had a great time. And then he started taking me to rock concerts. I saw Allman Brothers the first time at 13, then Santana, and a whole bunch of other stuff. And the rest
is the 70s, right?
I'm sorry?
It's in the 70s. Those
yes,
bands.
73, the summer of 73. Yes.
I see. That's about the time.
Sorry, did I say 73? I meant 72.
Okay, well, that is the exact same year I think I first smoked marijuana at a babysitter's house.
Yeah, so it was about summer of 72.
All right. So how did you become active in the movement to legalize it there in Kentucky? I know we have a lot of mutual friends and mutual experiences that have intersected a few times, but let's try to go logical.
Sort of together, but not together. So what happened is I smoked pot since the age of 13 for many, many years on and off. And then in fact, I sent you a link to an interview that I did with you at Gatewood's Memorial in 2012 and mentioned that I had gotten busted and said in 98, and I had to make a correction because it was actually 88. So I must have been stoned that day. I don't know. But so on February 20th at 12:30 a.m. was a Friday night, just after the Friday. Officially, it was the 20th. I had a knock on the door about 12:30 a.m. and I was like, oh God, I think that's cops, because you know they have that certain knock. You know how they knock. Thank God it was before the no-knock warrants. I'll just put that out there. And I had just under a half a pound of pot. You know, I'm such a good retailer. I had it all bagged up in quarters. And so long story short, I got busted and arrested, and I ended up with 5 years probation and did just under 4 years of that before I was finally released, which was this week was the anniversary, May 26th of 92. I was released off probation. In fact, I spent the anniversary, or the day, that weekend rather, of my release at Gatewood Stock 2 down in Kentucky. And so that was a blast. So after that, after the bust, that is, not the 4 years on probation, after the bust, I decided, you know, if they want to have a fight, they've started a fight for me. Instead of scaring me, they pissed me off, and I decided to become a pot activist. I know a lot of people get busted and they go, oh no, I can't smoke anymore. I have to go in the closet. Well, they made me come out of the closet, and I decided that I was going to get active. The first thing I did was to protect myself. I quit my job working at Budweiser and enrolled in college and went and got an AS degree in computer programming. And while I was there, I met a girl that was taking accounting, and it turned out she was on a radio station locally, WAIF radio, and that was my first connection to the radio station that I ended up on. And in fact, she became program director at some point and gave me my first hemp rock radio show. So it kind of started all where the bust happened, and I got in college as a result of that. And that kind of put me on the radio connections that I had to do shows, although as a kid in high school, I actually tried to do radio and television, and that's another story. Didn't make it out because of the FCC test. That then now they don't even want for radio. So in fact, at high school, I would have been on the high school station, and they shared the frequency with the station I ended up on 17 years later. It was kind of karmic. But so I wanted to be an activist. As I was going to college, I have to back up. So I got busted on February 20th, as I said, in 88. 10 days prior to that, though, I went to a local small club and saw Dr. Timothy Leary lecture. He was on the tour circuit at the time. And at that lecture afterwards, we're heading towards the door, and the big crowd's heading, and there's this guy, flyers for marijuana. And I go, I'll take one. And it's about a half sheet of 8x11. And it says free marijuana. Call this 900 number. That's how long ago this was. And I, the next day, call the number, and it turns out it's national normal. And I'm like, oh my goodness, I want to get hooked up. And in fact, they gave me the local contact numbers for the Cincinnati chapter of Normal and the Hamilton, Ohio chapter. The Hamilton, Ohio chapter was ran by a guy named Jay Ferguson, and the Cincinnati chapter was Loie Glover of Green Panthers fame later in her life. And I joined up.
When I first met office manager at National Normal in Washington, D.C., that was the late 80s and early 90s.
That's exactly right. So in 88, when I made contact with Loie and Jay, for that matter, I got on their list and said, hey, anything going on, let me know. I'd like to write, do whatever I can. And in the meantime, she ends up going to the national office and works as a secretary there, where she meets Terry Mitchell and others, and they make the Green Panthers later. At that interim, though, when she left Cincinnati to go to the National, she handed her list over to Cliff Burrows out of Ohio Normal. And with that, I started getting their Ohio Normal newsletter. and the summer newsletter of 1990. Now, remember, I went to school and graduated March of 1990 and had planned to get active over that couple of year period of time. And then when I got that Ohio Normal newsletter from Cliff from the Ohio Normal group, it had the dates of the Jack Hare hemp and coming to Cincinnati on October 20th, 1990. And I'm going, oh my God, I'm going to be there that Saturday. Well, the week of the Inside Edition, or one of those news magazine shows, had a segment on this guy in Kentucky running for governor who had the backing of Willie Nelson, and he wanted to legalize marijuana in the state of Kentucky. And I'm like, but I can't vote for him, but I am right next door, so I think I'll go work for him. So it turns out I went to the rally that October 20th. I actually saw Jack Hare, but didn't know who he was, so I didn't introduce myself because I was nobody at the point. And just learning everything and getting all the information and absorbing, what do you mean it's food and medicine, all of this other stuff? Because I was as ignorant as other people in the beginning. Gatewood did not make the rally that day. He got stuck in Lexington. But I did join the Green Democrats. That was the organization surrounding his first campaign for governor. And that's what started it for me. I ended up in the Green Democrats with the local chapter, and then met the Louisville chapter with Ron Moore and a bunch of other people out of Kentucky. And that started my activism hands-on through the Gatewood Galbraith campaign. And the rest is history for me. Go ahead.
For our audience who don't know the geography, Louisville and Cincinnati are just separated by the Ohio River, right? It's like
technically in an hour and a half of going west. So we go a little bit south into Kentucky, about 10 miles, and then you pick up 71 and you're an hour and a half from Louisville.
Right.
So we're kind of the same thing, but they're on the opposite side of the river. They even have big river fireworks like we do and stuff. And Lexington's about an hour and a half also south of us. So that's all kind of couched right to where I have access to that. And then we were also the Northern Kentucky chapter of the Green Democrats and actually opened an office and did all kinds of stuff. And that was actually the first stuff that I did in concert production, festivals for the hemp issue, that kind of stuff was under Gatewood's campaign. And then the first one that I did with the Hemp Rock name was November 7th of 1992. So it just all kind of like snowballed into, well, we lost the first campaign on May 28th, which was this weekend, by the way, the anniversary of that. And I'm like, okay, what now? And that's how Hemp Rock was born. I wanted to do something that still included music.
91.
The name I started in 91. Yes, did I say 92? The first event was not until 92, but I started using the name and marketing it as Hemp Rock. And what I was doing on May 29th, technically, is the anniversary, because I started it the next day after Gatewood lost that campaign in 91. So officially, May 29th is the anniversary of the kickoff for Hemp Rock.
I flew to Louisville and went to Lexington, where Gatewood with Willie Nelson kicked off their 90-mile drive through the state capitol. That was in October of 1990. I flew in with this fellow, John Sajo. But Gatewood had introduced me to Willie just a couple months prior to that by telephone.
Yeah.
And,
now you realize, Paul, that what you're talking about when Willie and Gatewood drove around in his red Mercedes wagon that ran on diesel fuel with 25% hemp fuel, that's the story that was being told on the Inside Edition segment that I saw. It was about the tour for the hemp tour with the Hempmobile, just about that time of that concert that Willie did at that time. And that's how I found out.
Yeah, CNN had something called Earth Watch that they used to do, and it was featured internationally on CNN on Earth Watch.
Yeah, I didn't see that because I might have had cable. I don't remember, but I didn't see that. But it was that magazine. I want to say Inside Edition, but again, it could have been Current Affair. You know, there's so many of those on TV. I don't remember anymore. And besides, I was probably stoned. Of course, I'm joking, but no.
You know, Willie did a concert for Gatewood in Louisville. But the newspaper and radio would not allow him to advertise. So it was one of Willie's shows that didn't sell many tickets because it was advocating for Gatewood, and Gatewood was pro-marijuana. So they used that as an excuse to say, Willie Nelson couldn't advertise.
Yeah, isn't that ironic? And the irony of that is I have only been turned down by a radio station one time to not take my money and air commercials for our events, and that was the Northern Kentucky University WNKU, WNKU, which has now been sold to a Christian company, and they don't even exist now, Karma. But I had one of the Global Marijuana March commercials that I was going to air for our events, and they absolutely refused it. Oh, it says marijuana in it, yet they're advertising our local store Hemptations because they didn't say marijuana in the commercial. And that's the only time I've been turned down. And I always praised the old Clear channel that is now iHeart. I don't like iHeart anymore. I think they suck. They've ruined radio. But when they were still Clear Channel, based out of Cincinnati via Texas, they were pretty open. And I started running commercials on one of their local stations for the first event in 1992. And it was a shock to a lot of people hearing commercials like that on radio. And in fact, I'll share with you, as you know, I've been doing a lot of, oops, I didn't mess it up, did I?
No.
I've been reworking a lot of old audio into videos up on our YouTube page. And I recently had found one of my files of my old hemp rock commercials. And I'm like, I'm missing some of them. Where are they? Well, long story short, I'm also trying to find a bunch of old videos. And in so looking through them, I found some old cassette tapes. And one of them was a hemp rock commercial tape. And it so happens that it has the ones that was missing out of my file. So I have the commercials from the Gary Shepherd fundraiser, one from 1995, and I think even the 97 event. I'm not sure, but I think I've got almost all the commercials that I ever ran.
For our audience that might not remember the Gary Shepherd story, we recently had Stacy Theis on the show, and she talked about Gary being her uncle and how he was basically murdered in a horrible way.
Yes,
was one of the things that brought her to activism. She mentioned how helpful
it is the thing that brought Stacy to activism. She was 18 when it happened. I've known her and the family that long, and that is exactly what brought her to activism. That's right.
And she's been working to free cannabis prisoners across the country and driving the Cannabis, which.
So now, if you go to the Hemp Rock Television link in YouTube, I just finished over the weekend some of those, well, not the commercials yet, but.
What is that link?
YouTube's Hemp Rock Television. Just Google Hemp Rock Television in YouTube, and you go to my playlist. And if you go to the playlist for Willie Nelson, I've reworked some of the audio clips and pictures into videos finally. And one of them was the Cannabis endorsement by Willie Nelson and the Teapot Party. That is there along with some other ones. And I've still got a lot more to work up, but that's just some of the stuff that we're doing now.
When was that endorsement?
Well, let's see. I believe it was about 2014-15. Sometime after, well, right before Gatewood died, he had put me in contact with Willie's people to get sound bites and different stuff for endorsements. And I did that for a couple of years and have a whole bunch of different ones. Some of them are up on hemprock.com. And now, as I said, I'm reworking them into videos where the pictures of the people and the audio clip are combined. That was having to learn a new trick, by the way. And I have a lot more to come. And but you can go to the Willie Nelson Teapot playlist is where that is. And so Willie did a lot of great stuff for us. He endorsed a whole bunch of different people, a local politician, of course, Gatewood, and my organization, many other organizations. So keep an eye out for that on that link there, and you'll see all the different endorsements that he did under the Teapot Party. That was started unofficially, him and then Steve Bloom of Celeb Stoner and myself and a bunch of other people started the national and the local chapters. We're the Cincinnati and Northern Kentucky chapter of Teapot Party. Not much is going on, but we still are. So yeah. So
tell us about the evolution of your show. You quit doing hemp rock and you're doing cable still sometimes there in Cincinnati. How many people are in Cincinnati?
Well, as far as the actual city proper, I'm not really sure anymore. At one time it was like a 500,000, but I think it's probably about 1 million. But if you go to the whole Hamilton County, which surrounds, Cincinnati's a part of, I don't even know, to be honest with you, Paul. I've lost track. Let me put it this way: not enough people to get thousands of people at our rallies. Let's put it that way. We are really a small city, a large town, and most people know somebody across town, and it's more like a neighborhood, quite frankly. We grew up. What school did you go to? Not what city are you from? Because everybody's just kind of close, and it's the 7 hills around the whole area. And on one hill, you can see the whole entire city and all the other hills, including across the river. So we're actually quite small considering, compared to some of the bigger cities like where you are, and even, of course, New York and that kind of stuff. So as I said earlier, I had already wanted to be in radio. I'm sorry?
About the same as Portland. Portland's about 650,000 now.
Oh, okay.
So, and about 1.5 to 2 million in the metro area. So
about the same then. You're right.
Right on a river, and you cross the river and you're in the other state,
Yeah.
There are some similarities there. We're closer to the ocean.
Yeah, that's a lot of the same thing, because the only thing I didn't get in the house I'm in was a fireplace and my river overview. I didn't get my overlook. And if I go about a mile south of where I'm at, if I'm on a hill, you can see the river and all of Kentucky. So that's how close I am. But,
so what are the laws like now? I know there was an initiative a couple of years ago that would have just let 10 groups have a monopoly on the medical marijuana market. Talk about Ohio's politics, and then we'll separately segue into what's going on across the river in Kentucky.
Well, years ago, John Hartman from North Coast Normal, who has now has since died, he worked in 1996, the same year that Dennis Perone got the state of California to pass medical with the ballot initiative. John Hartman lobbied, because we can do ballot initiatives, but it takes so much to get on the ballot, that he decided to work in the legislatures. And he got them to agree, and they passed in the legislature session of 96 a medical marijuana law that would have allowed doctors to prescribe, and there was even some more stuff involved in that. And then it so happened our local newspaper, the Enquirer, Cincinnati Enquirer, found out about it, and they started screaming in the press. Nobody even paid attention that the legislators passed this terrible medical marijuana law? And Governor Voinovich at the time, in the next session in January of 97, went in and said, "You all didn't even read that bill. You need to get rid of that bill." And they voted to overturn it. So we actually had medical marijuana on our books for 6 months, from 96 to that session in 97. Then over the years, all the different groups fought and never was able to get enough money to gather enough signatures to get it on the ballot. The Ohio Patient Network was that close in 2016. And what happened is a small group of people, a few people that were even working with the Ohio Patient Network, one that I had turned on to the group, that I met through a local politician who thought the guy was going to help us, ended up hooking up with some rich people in the state and decided to step away from the Ohio Patient Network and started their own group called Responsible Ohio. And they had the funds to get on the ballot for legalization for adults as well as medical. But it was going to be a constitutional amendment that, in that amendment, which would have been on the books until it was overturned by a vote by the people again, the legislators could not do it if it was a ballot initiative, which meant we would have had to raise millions of dollars to undo what they would have done if they would have passed. It only included 10 grows owned by the very people that wrote the bill. They would have been the only people to grow it, and they would have been the only people that had enough money to even open a dispensary to even sell it to anybody. And folks like me were like, we asked people for help, and we've been begging y'all for help for years, and now you're going to step on us and kick us out and own it yourself? Not going to happen. So myself and a whole other group of activists throughout the state lobbied against them and killed their bill.
Thank goodness. Thank goodness.
Thank goodness.
That enforced monopoly. I know I was talking to you and to Don Wirtschafter there in Ohio, and I know you worked together on a lot of different projects, including that one. So since that initiative, that was about 2014?
16, I believe. That was in 2016. And so as a result of that, the groups went to the legislators and said, look, all right, you didn't agree with that bill. So, I have to say, sometimes in our work, Paul, we have strange bedfellows. Okay, now just as an aside, to give an example of a strange bedfellow, recently on Twitter, I saw that General McCaffrey, remember General McCaffrey?
Yes, yeah.
He was a drug czar years ago. He put out a tweet against Trump and his minions. And I was like, first time I ever thought I'd agree with General McCaffrey. And I tweeted back to him, I guess we find ourselves in strange bedfellows, General. And he made some comment about Trump, and I went, yes, but I'm referring to when you were the drug czar and you opposed legalization of medical and legalization of adult or recreational marijuana, and I was fighting for it, and now we're on the same side. Funny how that works sometimes.
I remember when the Perone and the group of Soros-backed funders put medical marijuana on the ballot in California in '96. And McCaffrey had a press conference after they lost, denouncing our good friend and mentor, Todd McCarrea, and because he was helping medical patients. But McCaffrey, insulted him on a national press conference.
I sort of remember that. I actually had the pleasure of meeting Todd and interviewed him. It's one of the old shows I'll be digging out in the future of the stuff with Todd. But yeah, so the strange bed. I'm sorry.
Oh, I said he made so many videotapes. I actually bought his practice before he passed away, and I operated it for about a year there in the Bay Area. And I sold it back to his sister after about a year.
Wow, that's awesome. Well, the point of that is we had strange bed
here in Portland. Oh, he went to college here in Portland at Reed College.
Oh, nice.
I understand that his papers are now at, I think, at Harvard University.
Well, they should be. They absolutely should be.
He always videotaped everything. You remember he would carry his video camera around.
That's right. Smart man. If I didn't have camera, I did audio on a lot of stuff. There's so much stuff. I'm like, I need a few more lifetimes to archive all of this stuff. Well, I was lucky to meet Todd at the Science and Truth hearings that Gatewood had in 1993, of which, by the way, we have some of that video, and it will be uploaded to YouTube soon. We're working on finding it all and making sure that it's all good. But the point of all of that was the strange bedfellows of our Ohio legislators were also opposed to the Responsible Ohio. So we ended up having to go along with them. And I even supported another amendment that said nobody can get signatures and put a ballot initiative on the ballot if it creates a monopoly. They killed the ability of anybody to put a monopoly on a ballot, whether it's marijuana or anything else. And I totally supported that. No group of people with money should be able to get a ballot initiative on a voter ballot that gives them sole control of a commodity, no matter what it is, right? And so I supported that from our legislators as well. So that's what I meant by strange bedfellows. We all agreed, and because we agreed with them and helped kill the Responsible Ohio bad bill, they agreed to give us a medical marijuana bill. Now, is it the best? Of course not. The difference with the medical marijuana that they passed in the legislature is that it's easy to change. All they have to do is either the legislators, by being lobbied, will change it, or the commission that was set up can change it. And in fact, they just did. They just added, I think, 70 more dispensaries, licensing. So there's going to be more opening up in the state of Ohio. And although it's still expensive, it's still not as bad as it would have been under Responsible Ohio.
How many dispensaries are there now?
Well, I know in the city of Cincinnati, there's 3, or in this area. And so I think it's about that in every city. And then smaller towns might have 1 or 2. That's something I'd have to look up and see the actual amount. But it was capped at a certain amount that we could have. And now they've opened it up and there's going to be a whole bunch more. The growing part, I'm not sure. They did just add a few more things in the conditions, but not enough. They haven't added depression yet, for instance. And we know that it helps with depression. So as compared to, say, okay, you can't really compare it to California's medical when they had medical because it's apples and oranges, but it's still, in some respect, for some patients, better than what we had. Now, if somebody doesn't care about that and they only want to possess under 100 grams, in the rest of Ohio, they can lose their pot and get a fine of $150. We changed that, at least in Cincinnati, a little bit. Our city council, about 1.5 years ago now, passed an ordinance where it is of considered lowest priority, no arrest, no fines, but they can still take your stash if they find a stash on you. So the only thing that really helped with was any record and the minor misdemeanor payout ticket. You don't get the ticket. So what I tell everybody is if you don't want to lose your weed and you can at least qualify for the medical, go get a medical. That way you can go to a store, buy 1 package to keep stuff in, buy it from your local dealer if you want, and just make sure if you're traveling, keep it in your dispensary container and have your medical card on you. That way they don't take your weed.
Well, so, it's a way for the cops to get free weed. That's what I
exactly.
Your friends get free weed, but fortunately, that's less the case here where I'm at in a totally regulated market now.
That's right. So I'm going to pull something up and share it with you.
Okay.
Sure, where I'm at.
Send us the video link and we can just play it over. We can Bill. It gives him some extra work, but he can pop it.
On purpose.
Did they do that on purpose just because it was you?
Well, no. What happens is when you fill it out and you pay your $50 to the state to get the card, you put all the information in after the doctor does his part or their part, and then you sign up. And when the day that you sign up is the date that you get it. And so I purposely did it on 4/20.
I understand.
Yeah. The story behind that and why, because personally, Paul, I don't really care if I have a medical. I qualify, and I believe I use medical marijuana. In fact, I have since I'm a kid, and didn't always associate it, though. But for me, like you said, besides the cops getting free weed, it's also doctors making money off of people like us that already know more than the doctor, right?
Yeah.
And I've always said, why should I pay a doctor in the state to tell me it's okay to use something that I've been using anyway? Except for that protection if I'm traveling. But then a number of years ago, my mom, when she died in 2014. So a number of years before that, she was always complaining. She had a lot of arthritis and other issues. She was a dialysis patient. She couldn't sleep. She'd wake up and she couldn't go back to sleep. And I was always, Mom, use my marijuana. I'll give you some cookies or some brownies. Just a little bit. It'll help you sleep. And although one day she loved what I was doing, the next day, I wish you'd quit smoking that stuff. It smells. So she would go back and forth. And I finally said, look, I'm going to go to the doctor with you one day. And I'm going to say to the doctor, shouldn't she be doing this? Now, the reason why is a little background. The doctor that she ended up with when he was a teenager, when I was a teenager as well, he was 14, I was 12. Maybe he was 16, but he was 2 years different. So for a couple of years, he worked in our family grocery store. So I grew up in the Chef's Parkview Market, which was here in town, under my dad, the butcher. This guy, Richard Goldfarb, got hired through his high school co-op class. You know how the high school kids get jobs. And he even ended up dating my older sister for a few months here and there. And so years later, my mom gets him as a doctor, and he goes, "Are you the same chef family that had the grocery store years ago?" And she's like, "Yes, my husband was the butcher." And he's like, "I used to work there." And that set off their friendship as doctor patient. So the whole family knew that her doctor was now Dr. Richard Goldfarb, who used to work as a kid in the grocery store. So I decided, I have a feeling he's going to support me, so I'm going to the doctor with you, Mom. And I did. And along with medical marijuana and some other things like digestive enzymes and different stuff, he agreed with everything I said and said, "Helen, you should do what your daughter says. I support medical marijuana. You should try it." And she agreed. And the side story is, of course, she ate just a little bit. And the next day I said, "So, Mom, how did you sleep?" She goes, "Well, I didn't wake up till 10:30. And I went, "Well, that's great. It must have worked." She goes, "I don't know if that's what it was, and I don't want to do it again." So my little brother ate the cookies instead, who lived with her. The point of that is Dr. Richard Goldfarb supported medical marijuana. Now, she died in 2014. And then a couple of years ago, I'm on the Ohio medical marijuana site looking to see what local doctors have signed up and all the different stuff to see what's up here locally. And on the list, I see a Dr. Richard Goldfarb, and I'm like, could it be the same doctor? So I called up my little brother. He's 4 years younger than me, so he's old now. And I said, "So you're still his patient. Do you know if he's the same Richard Goldfarb that's on the list?" And he says, "I don't know." I go, "Well, ask him next time you go." He did. And I talked to my brother and I go, "So?" And he goes, "Yep, he says it's him, but he works at TriHealth. They won't let him use it, so he can't do anything with it right now. Although his name is associated with an office across town." I said, "Okay." Well, my brother's birthday was in April, and I called him up and I said, "So, happy birthday." And he goes, "Guess what?" I go, "What?" He goes, Dr. Goldfarb retired." And I went, "Oh, really?" He goes, "Yeah, I went in January for an appointment and they said he retired, so I have a new doctor." And I went, "Well, I'm going to make a bet with you." I said, "I'm going to bet that he'd only retired from TriHealth and now he's exclusively working as a medical marijuana doctor. And if I'm right, I'm going to get us both a medical marijuana card just because, for karma." And so I called up the office that week, and indeed it was the same doctor. I thought it was hilarious because, as I mentioned, my mom would get hot and cold on the issue. And sidebar family story, because I'm such a terrible person for being a marijuana activist and not holding a regular full-time job, that in 1998, my older sister and older brother and one of my other little brothers convinced my mom to sell her condo, so Lynn had to move out. Because Lynn just needed to get a real job, right? And in fact, I had an argument with my sister about this when my mom died in 2014 and haven't talked to her since. Because I think I've done better than just a regular job, right? So for me, it was karma to go get a medical marijuana card from the very doctor that my actual sister, who I used to get high with, used to date, and supports me so much that now he's giving out medical marijuana cards. So I helped him create a new business. And so I thought, if I'm going to get a medical marijuana card, Paul, it's got to be from that doctor and on 420. So that's what happened. My brother and I got one for my brother because he also qualified. We had a wonderful chat with the doctor, and he totally supports, and obviously, and I totally support him now. And in fact, by buying a card through him. So that's my karmic story. I've been treated like crap by my family. I'm sorry?
Viewers in that area, because we do go out on Facebook now, and maybe some of them will go to Dr. Goldfarb.
Well, I posted that I had got the card and put out there a link to his place. His place is called Green Health Med or Green Med Health. I can't remember, but if you get a hold of me, you can get a hold of the doctor if you're local and want to use him in his office. So I just thought that was so fantastic that.
So, Lynn, you and I think last met in person at Gatewood Galbraith's funeral, and our longtime viewers know who Gatewood is, and you put together a little memorial. Would you like to do an introduction to that?
Yeah, well, so Gatewood was asked to be the main person to do a eulogy for Jack Hare at his funeral in 2010, right? And you can find that on the web. It's kind of hard to find. I looked for it and found pieces of it at one place. But he had given me a copy of the same speech that he had done at HempFest that year as well. You have that copy. And so I decided, while looking for stuff that we had done, and of course found the interview that we did at Gatewood's Memorial. In fact, there was 2 of them when he died in January of 2012. And so we chatted for about 10 minutes about Gatewood and the different stuff that we both have done around Gatewood's campaign. And you had mentioned and asked me if I had heard his eulogy about Jack at the funeral. And I had indeed, and had the copy from the HempFest, and decided that when I uploaded our interview as a video, that I would tack on the end of that. So if they go to Hemp Rock Television and YouTube, to the playlist for Hemp Rock Radio and TV, or TV and Radio, you'll find the interview that Paul did with me at Gatewood's Memorial. And the second half of that is the audio of that eulogy that Gatewood did at HempFest for Jack Hare. It's also separate in there too, but it's a lot more meaningful for both of us, since you happened to mention it and we talked about it. I thought it would be cool to put it at the end of your video. And so that's actually, from what I remember, I don't even think I had that audio up on my other site, because at some point I stopped editing stuff and putting it up. So I think it's the first time that our interview with you has been uploaded on the web. And so I encourage everybody to go listen to it and get an idea of where we both stand with Gatewood and the similarities in what we've done. And I think it's funny because you started just before I got involved with Gatewood, and you got to be at that first concert with Willie, where I missed that first one, and as a result of that concert joined his campaign. And so we have been kind of parallel over the years between where you're at and where I'm at.
I actually met Gatewood when I was just 18 years old at the White House Smoke-In. And that was 1978. But then I really got to know him better after the mid 80s at the normal conferences. That's where I'm in Washington, D.C. But here, let's run a little excerpt of that, and we'll be back in just a minute.
Fantastic.
The miraculous healing powers of this herb, and many sick and dying people have found comfort in its use after reading his wonderful manifesto, The Emperor Wears No Clothes. I am one of them. Jack Hare's grand spirit may have left his worn out body, but he has entered into the hearts and minds of millions of us who will forever be grateful to have been educated by his commitment to the truth. God bless you, Jack Hare. The message that Jack and I have is that your younger generation are open to perils to which he and I never had to conceive. That there is a great move afoot to take you out of the property of sovereign human beings and put you into the property of the man. The man. The petrochemical, pharmaceutical, military, industrial, transnational, corporate, fascist, elite son of a bitches. You see the Constitution and the Bill of Rights as impediments to the implementation of their new world order and global economy. And they are not warm and fuzzy about you or me or our children or grandchildren. And they are afraid to give everybody in the rest of the world due process and constitutional rights. So in order to make it one world, they're going to take ours away.
Well, I want to thank Lynne Wilson for doing that. And thank you, Lynne, for being our guest. If our audience wants to reach out to you and follow you, I know you're on YouTube, and you have a website, at least one website too. There.
Well, actually, I have a few. So to find everything, you can go to hemprock.com. That is the main portal for everything that we do. And right now we do have weedradionetwork.com. That will stay up as long as I'm around. That has numerous audios of shows that we did on WVQC here locally, the second station that we were on. And unfortunately, that's one of the reasons why we ended our show. Gatewood died January of 2012. My co-host / public access guy died May of 2012, and other people moved and left town, and we lost a bunch of volunteers. So everything kind of came to a screeching halt for the stuff that I did. And by the end of 2012, the radio station was gone, and our local Cincinnati public access shut down. Unfortunately, our city council killed our budget, and the rest is history. So that meant I had to turn to the internet. So the first thing we did do was I had Weed Radio Network, and I had been uploading stuff there. At some point, I wanted to do a secondary site with that was a WordPress style better, and it just never happened. But I had stopped editing and uploading shows because I didn't want to have to move a whole bunch more. I figured I'd do it all later. Over that time frame, I decided just to learn how to do videos, which I have. I have to give a shout out to Shotcut, the free video editing program that I use. It's a great, easy program if people want to learn that. And so now I'm taking old audios and making them videos and uploading them to Hemp Rock Television. So everything that had already been on Chuck's YouTube page has now been moved over to this one, and everything new that hasn't been already up is now being uploaded. And over time, it's just going to be a mess of stuff. I can't even tell you how many folders and how many video cassettes and how many of this that I have to work with. In fact, we thought we could get it archived a different way, and it's not working. So now I've decided I have to physically take my tapes. Unfortunately, my U-matic 3/4 inch are moldy. Not going to work with those, but we have a bunch of 8 mil and 1/2 inch that I'm going to take to a local archivist for them to do a lot of our video archiving, so then I can upload it. So everybody stay tuned. YouTube, Hemp Rock Television. You can find it at hemprock.com, weedradionetwork.com. I also have the Cincinnati Marijuana Law.com to tell the story of different stuff that's happened over the years in Cincinnati, including when they recrimmed us for a few years before we got that back overturned, and more coming. We've got city council meetings, all kinds of stuff to put up. So those are the main sites, but like I said, hemprock.com is the main place, or Hemp Rock Television and YouTube.
Thank you, Lynn. I thank you for your lifetime of activism work and helping so many different people in your community in so many ways.
Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it. It's been a long time since I've done anything. I real quick want to give out my phone line locally is 513-68-4-HEMP. That is the Hemp Rock Audio Magazine and Hemp line. So if you want to just make contact that way, you can do that as well. So I appreciate it. It's been a pleasure. I want to thank your engineer over there for helping with the tech stuff. And I hope to do it again sometime when I have a lot more stuff up on YouTube to talk about.
Thanks, Lynn. I appreciate your work, and keep working out there to restore hemp.
You bet. Definitely restore hemp. And thank you for all your work as well, Paul. You do great stuff out there. And thank you for the legalization of Oregon marijuana.
It's a lot of us. I appreciate it.
You led it. Don't be shy, honey. You led that.